want to thank everyone coming out. I know this was a hard time. That's why we asked Manchester TV to come to record it for us. They can put it up because a lot of people wanted to be here, but 4 o'clock is tough. But for some of the people that I needed to have at this first meeting, this was the only time that they could make it. So again, thank you. I know it's a tough time. I appreciate you all being here. Those who don't know me, I think I know everybody. I have a new friend. I am Victoria Sullivan. I was a state rep twice. I served in the House Education Committee. I was also an assistant majority leader. So I have a lot of contacts on the state level and the county level because of my work in the state level. And I think most of you live here, so you know that I ran for mayor as well. And this is one of the reasons that I ran was because of this situation. And unfortunately, it has continued to develop. Is there a door there? I know. It has continued to grow to a point where now we are making national headline for the most horrific things happening in our city, like a baby being born and being left outside in the cold and a woman dying outside of a tent at Christmas. And we're seeing every day, there were 7 overdoses today and so far. And tomorrow, as the weather approaches, we're looking at -10 degrees, and that's just an impossible situation for people to live in. So far, the city keeps creating shelters, which -10, of course we need shelters because the first thing is to keep people alive, right? Like right now, it's seriously life and death. But there's no long-term solution. And the more that we announce we're opening shelters, the more people are bringing their homeless here. Only 1 in 4 of the people living on our streets right now are actually from Manchester. They came here, many of them, because they were given promises based on what Safe Station was doing. And they came here for help, and we weren't able to give them help after the initial contact because it grew. And the city kept announcing that we could take people that we just couldn't handle. So people came here seeking help, and they're still living out there. And I think that's an important part of the conversation because there's a misunderstanding that a lot of these people just want to be on the streets shooting up. They don't want any help. And of course, there's going to be some people that want to live out there. There's some veterans I talk to all the time out there that have no interest in coming inside, and just giving them services and keeping them healthy is about all you can do for somebody that doesn't want help. But there are a lot of people that came here for help that just didn't get it, that are living out there. So does everybody have a handout? So this is a plan that I have put forward several times in the past. I actually met with aldermen about it. I presented it to the board, and I've put it past some of you in the past because a lot of you that are in this room actually are on the ground doing this work or living it daily because you're business owners. And so I just want to go through it real quick. And then we can, I'll go through each section, and then we'll take questions and talk about each section if that's okay. And I'm trying to keep this to an hour because I really know your time is valuable and so appreciate you being here. So the important steps to take to move the city forward, because that's really what, we know what the problems are. We don't need to talk about how bad things are here. We just really want to get to the work of moving the city forward. The first is outreach and bringing people home. 1 in 4 people, like I said, are from here. If we had to deal with 1/4 of the problem that we're facing, that's a much easier task to handle. It's not as overwhelming. Connect people to local resources. A lot of folks on the street don't even know what the local resources are. I think I was talking to somebody about that earlier. They don't even know what the resources are. Transitional housing and support. And we've got people in this room, they're experts on that. Fiscal responsibility is a key issue because I don't care where you stand politically. As property taxes increase, the only result is more homeless people because the property taxes increased so significantly over the last couple of years that rents jumped to $300-400 a month. And people are now struggling to stay in their homes with heating costs going up as well. We're going to find more people that are pushed out of their current housing, and we're going to have a bigger problem if this continues. So fiscal restraint is incredibly important. And the state has been great in this area. They've actually returned millions of dollars back to the city for property tax relief that we as property owners never saw because they increased the budget to absorb that instead of giving it to the people that actually needed it. And legislative and county support. So there were legislators that really wanted to be here tonight. They're in session. Then they had committee after. They called me they're gonna watch this video too, and they really want to arrange the next meeting, they can be here because they understand how important it is to have their involvement, and also county. The county handles a lot of the nursing homes, long-term facilities. Tony Pappas gave me an outline of the money that has come in from the county. The governor gave me an outline of the money that's come in from the state. And when you see the kind of support we've had from the outside, it leaves you confused as to how we're still in this position, because it was $80 million from the state level, and that was as of last year. That doesn't include money came in this year. And from the county level, I think we were looking at 21 million for the American Rescue Plan. So 12% went to youth services, 47 went to mental health and substance abuse, 47% of that money, and I don't think that we have seen a result on that money. So first, only 1 in 4 people living on the streets are from Manchester. Many came here based on promises made by our city leaders that we could provide care and support. As well-intentioned as it may have been, we have never been able to deliver on those promises, leaving many abandoned on our streets. We need to get those people the help they sought. So the goal of this is to identify where they are from and get them services and help there. Finding local help for 1/4 of the population is a much easier task. How do we do that? So people, when I say this to people, I get pushback from people saying, no, nobody wants that, they're not gonna leave, and no one's gonna accept that help and assistance, except there are organizations out there that are doing it right now. We have a small group of people doing it. They're reaching out, getting to know people. This is where your expertise comes in with the databases. And we're able to actually find out where the people are that can support them in their own home and get them services back there. Like I said, they came here with the promise of services. They didn't get it. They're willing to go and get healthy back where they're from. So we have to create a transportation fund, a network of outreach volunteers, and people who can connect people with services, care, and support. Create consistent outreach protocol and a data system. This allows us to identify people and keep track of the conversation and progress with them. It creates trust between the volunteers and the people they're reaching. It determines what kind of support the person needs and identifies if they have family and friend support. So my friend Kevin, you can tell your story.
Well,
I
try
got
to keep
Kevin
it
here
limited
tonight.
because I get passionate and I have issues with my throat, so I don't speak that loud sometimes, but I do speak. If you don't mind, I'll do just a short history of where I've been and why I feel like I got something to say.
Yes, please.
Okay. So a lot of times I have not admitted this because a lot of people know me around town, but I had my little bout of homelessness about 10 years ago in Manchester. Just a number of things happened. It can happen to anybody. I was a business owner, a homeowner, taxpayer in the city, and just a number of things happened. And so, not to get too far off the track, but when you're a business owner, you don't get unemployment when your business goes. You don't get that. You don't get welfare unless you've got an accountant that can put all your, I couldn't even get fuel assistance, so I lost my house. So I'm not here to whine about it, but I'm just saying I've been through some of this stuff. And it's not easy, but people can get out of it, but they need a little bit of a hand up. And I think we've kind of created a magnet here of giving tents out and different things. It sounds bad, but the more that you give people without requiring anything of them, they're gonna plant themselves right there. So I don't wanna get into all the psychology, because I know I've been around them. I might be a little different figure because I'm a business owner, entrepreneur. And so maybe I was able to pull myself out because I was creative enough to get the business back together, but it took me 6-7 years. So I won't get into all of it. I just want people to know that I've been there. So I feel like I have a kind of a unique perspective on it. But that doesn't mean I have the same view of a lot of them that are out there, because a lot of them are out there. They are so worn down with being promises and this and that, and they're just worn down. So you talk to them, they'll go, yeah. So it seems like they don't want help. They don't trust you. We have to establish some trust, I think. But what I think the main thing that I've been talking to Victoria about is when I went homeless, I was a veteran, and they did not have the veterans place like they do on Somerville Street here. I had to go down to Nashua. I didn't want to go there. I went to New Horizons. I hated it. I won't get into all of that, but I was not a good resident because I kept speaking up for people. I got myself in trouble. I got banned one time, but it's because I didn't want that situation. But it wasn't just for me. I didn't want it for anybody. So it was troubling to me in my city that I see this. So it isn't just recent with Mayor Craig. A lot of this was happening before, but it compounded itself by giving people tents and it sounds good, but if you don't incentivize it, I'll give you a tent, but you have to sign up for a program. You have to go into rehab. If you don't require that, I'm not saying keep it all from them, but you're not preventing them from getting it. All you're doing is asking them to do something. But where I'm getting at with this is I was on the continuum of care in Nashua because I ended up in Nashua. And them down there, Peter Kelleher is the CEO of Harbor Homes, if anybody knows them. They do good work, but they kind of like the homeless that's how they feed. I'm sorry to say, but a lot of these agencies, that's what they do. I'm not knocking them, they do really, really good work. But sometimes it's just like, I'm gonna use a statement not everybody likes it, was Dr. Ben Carson said it when he was director of HUD or one of those agencies. He said, we do a pretty good job of putting people in shelters, but we don't do a real good job of getting them out. So once they're in there, what do? Because the agencies sometimes, they're trying to help. I know they're trying to help. But what happens is, the more they're needed, it doesn't really help them get out. You have a lot of, they have people that are really good about helping with addiction problems and rehab. We have a high recidivism, but I think, if you can get a good portion of those people to be productive citizens, we can't just say, oh, well, no, you can't do that and they won't do that. No, you have people going in there, but they have to be offered it. So it takes a lot of work. It takes outreach, which is hard. I did it before. I got my face spat at. I got my brochures ripped up and thrown in my face by fellow veterans. And one guy, if you don't
Excuse
mind,
me, sir, but the VA does have a book about this thick of what they offer, because I was a financial counselor in Massachusetts, and I hounded them so much, they said, we're gonna send you a book. You may be able to get one for us.
You're right. You can get VA right up here in Manchester. You can get one. So let me say that's a good idea, but I'm going to tell you please don't take it the wrong way. That book isn't going to help anybody. It will direct them.
Well, we can help them.
You're right. It's a good resource. It's a great resource.
If nobody does anything, it's not going to matter.
Right. That's what I'm getting at. I'm not very eloquent sometimes at doing that. But here's what I know from being in the continuum of care in Nashua. They're a pretty good continuum of care. Peter Kelleher said, because I was complaining down there too, I didn't like it. He goes, you should go to the continuum of care and bring up some of your issues. Because he's been running that organization for 35, 37 years. And when I started talking to him, he said, wow. He goes, I sometimes do have tunnel vision because I've been doing this for so long. And I'm not going to say I agree with everything that you say, but we have a continuum of care, which I am part of. Bring it up there, because I might not be able to entertain all of what you're saying, but I think you have some validity to what you're saying. But I can't just change all the rules of our shelter and what we do. So put me on the continuum of care. I was very nervous and just embarrassed that I had been homeless. I didn't know these people were in Nashua. But so I was, believe it or not, I was quiet for 6 months. Yeah, sometimes you can get me quiet for a few minutes, but for about 6 months I didn't say much, but I'm hearing them all talking about these HUD regulations and all this, all that, and I know they have to, that's what the continuum of care is, they have to carry out that, of the HUD mandates. But I got so sick of hearing it, and so I made a couple comments, just similar to what I just said. I said, so tell me how all these programs are helping people. It's all kinds of stuff that's there. Tell me how you're getting them in there, because I don't hear a lot about that. So he says, oh, well, we have a homeless management information system. That is the key right there, so I'm going to repeat that again later. A homeless management information system back then was the legacy HMIS system. Anybody familiar with that? Anybody know what that HMIS is? Okay, well, I'm not glad, but I'm glad that I'm speaking about something maybe you don't know about. The HUD mandates at each state or each continuum of care. We have 3 in the state of New Hampshire. We have Manchester, Nashua, and the rest of the state. So there's 3 entities, and they have to contract out for a system. HMIS is Homeless Management Information System. There again, that and manual, like I said, that isn't gonna help them. But if we're not working from the same sheet of music, it's not gonna work. And what's really troubled me, and I'm gonna go back a little bit, but right now what troubles me is that I left Manchester and I went to Vermont for a while. I come back and it's worse. I said, what happened to the Homeless Management Information System? And I searched around, I said, no, we got the one exactly that you recommended. We have that now. But guess what? A lot of people don't use it. They don't even know it's there. The state runs it, and when I talked to the, I'm not sure if her title, the homeless manager lady,
Coordinator, director?
I talked to her, very nice lady, knowledgeable, but there again, she's a social worker, and I'm not down on social worker. I'm just saying sometimes there's reality that has to step in. Because all the science of how you do this, that might be great, but the reality, that's where I came up and I irritated a lot of people because I said, this is great science. So a little exchange I had down there after sitting there for 6 months, I said, I'm so tired of hearing all these HUD things. And I made a comment about one of the nonprofits. I said, so how are you doing that? And she actually stood up and she says, you need to learn more about nonprofits. So I stood up and I said, you need to learn more about homeless people. So we're both right. I do. But there's the rub. There's the hard part. So where do you collect the data so that you can manage these people? So I made this statement even to, I know he can be a lightning rod sometimes, but Joe Kelly Lavasser's been a friend of mine for years. And I said, Joe, he says, so what is that all about? And I said, it's nonpartisan. It's data collection. Oh, and then I sent him a video, the same one I sent to you. He says, okay, so it can be done. I go, yes, but you have to use it. Okay, so if you have a manual from the VA, you have to use it. It gives you good guidelines, and you need that. In the HMIS system, if you're not using it, how do you get data on people? So, if I'm going too long, just let me know.
No,
But-
that's what I want you to get to,
But when
is
you-
the system that we need to get so that we're
Sure.
all using
So-
the same information and
Right.
have access to it.
Sure. So I won't say I have all the answers, but what we're doing now, we're just moving the deck chairs on the Titanic, aren't we? So you have an encampment.
We need
I came back to
action.
town and that's what I see. I said, what on earth is going on? And I went back to some of my contacts and, most of them are in Nashua, but they know pretty much what's going on. And they somehow have prevented it. They do a few things differently, but they do embrace the HMIS. So that's what I find is I go around and I went to a symposium in Concord it was about homeless, and we had these breakout sections. It's all over the state. Of course, I'm sitting with the Manchester group. So we have the mayor from Somersworth, Dover, and another one, I don't remember where, but all out towards the seacoast. Mayor Craig was not there. They did have, I don't know if it's his last name, Howard Hope, the guy from the Hope. He was very good, but he's a little piece of the pie. Then another lady that was from another place in Manchester, but they were just little pieces of the pie. It was not the mayor. So I'm not here to bash the mayor either. I'm just saying we're not getting great representation either. So what the tools that they have is the HMIS system, which is now data driven. A lot of them, they don't want to learn. It's hard to learn. And
So we can get that though, it's accessible to us if we wanted to get it?
Well, I can't answer that exactly. I think you have to have a need to know. But if
Okay.
you're an agency, you can get it. A
We'll
lot
find-
of them are not taking advantage of it. And I hear all these complaints and I say, do you want to end the homelessness or not? That's what I say.
Do you have any idea how long the wait is for drug rehab? Because I know it was like a 3-week wait to get in.
Yeah, that could be true. I don't really know.
It's not.
But if you don't collect the
Hold on a
data,
second.
pardon me,
It's not.
Okay.
Get it right
You
away
can
now?
get in somewhere right now.
okay.
Wonderful.
Yeah, that's something I didn't know that.
So
but-
good to hear.
But if you're not collecting the data and everybody's not working from the same sheet of music, just because your nonprofit doesn't want to do it. I heard this the other day, and it was the same thing in Nashua. Well, FIT gobbles up all the grants. So why do we want to work with them? Well, there's incentive that we're all working together, and you can get really good reports from that for your own organization. It gives you a list of people that are homeless. So here's the other thing I get. They talk about objections. I'm an old salesperson and you gotta handle objections. So one nonprofit person. I'm trying not to pick on any person. They're in the welfare department in Manchester, so I'm sorry if that offended, and I don't think she's a bad person. She just told me, well, that takes a lot of data entry. Yeah? I said, are you doing intake now? Yes. So you're writing it out longhand, right? It's essentially the same information. They're just putting it in a database so everybody can share it. So that's the basis of this. If you want to achieve a goal, even in my business, if something's going wrong, I go back to the data, because I can have my own personal feelings or political feelings. I can have all those. But if we're not working from that same data sheet, so it starts, I won't get into all of it, but it starts with what's called a coordinated entry, okay? And that's developed between the members of the COC. They developed a coordinated entry program. So what that means is there's some terms like no wrong door. All right, so what that means is they should be able to go to any agency and to be able to be served, okay? But if they're not sharing the same data, what good is that doing? It's a paperwork shuffle. You go in the welfare department, check, check, check. Oh, you didn't do that. Go back out and see. To me, I've been there, and it's hard because I am embarrassed to go in there. But when you need it, you need it. And I'm not saying these people are bad. I think they feel hamstrung by the system that they had. Now they have a good system. They don't want to use it. I don't want to speak for all of them. Some don't want to use it. And at that symposium, I heard a couple of complaints. And then I went directly to the guy that both this, it's called the Clarity HMIS system, created by BitFocus. I even talked to the engineer. He's out there in Vegas. I talked to him quite a few times. I told him the situation. So I'm not taking credit for all of it, but he was listening to information, so he's creating his software because the old one is just terrible. I mean, well, it just didn't do a good job. So just quickly on a tech note, anybody's kind of technically oriented, they had a system, and Harbor Homes was trying to run it for the whole state, but it had all these servers, okay? Nowadays, and even 10 years ago, everything goes to the cloud. You don't need all that space, and you don't need 12 employees to run those computers. So you're saving money, but then you get the pushback, well, I'd have to lay off those people. And I'm sorry, private industry people get laid off all the time. Maybe that sounds cold, but they didn't want to lay off the people, so they're gonna stick with an old lousy system. Okay, well now we have the system. They don't have those people there anymore. I think they kept some of them and put them in other positions, but that can be done. It happens in private industry all the time. So this is why I get frustrated, because I'm a small business owner, and you have to react to this stuff. You can't just push it down the road and make somebody else responsible for it. So I repeat that a number of times, and I have to Victoria too, is that this HMIS system, I think, is the key to start. Just like the VA manual, it's a guide, but if you're not using it, what good is it? So the coordinated entry is just, okay, so all the nonprofits will say, well, we don't do this and we don't do that. I said, yeah, but there's a core questions that you ask. So an example is, where did you sleep last night? Okay. Now, I've always got the pushback, they're not gonna answer you. Okay, next.
Can these homeless get Social Security? Can they get Medicaid?
Some of them do.
Yeah, some of them do.
Some
They
of
use
them
the
do,
shelter
and that's
for-
how they
So
manage to
that's
stay
the
out there.
main step we need to start with, is get them on Social Security, get them on Medicaid, so they can get the help they need.
So let's just, one second.
Yeah.
So to accomplish number one, first thing we need to do, you and I will have to work with the guy from the representative from
Yeah,
this
it's
system
both from
and find
New
out
Hampshire.
how
The
we
guy
get
does
to
the
use it,
training,
and maybe
yeah.
there's an agency that we can coordinate
Yeah,
with and lets us
I can
use
look
it,
that
right?
up and see.
Because that data is really important if we want to
It's very important.
count how many times we've had contact with someone, what they need, and otherwise you're starting over every single time you meet somebody. So we're gonna go on to, thank you.
Yeah,
We're gonna go on to, I just wanna move on because of
Yeah,
time.
no, I know.
Number two, we need to create a framework to help that is, of the help that is currently available, identifying where we have gaps and reach out to people, organizations, companies that can fill them. Like you said, that VA book, that's a good start. The goal to get as many people on the road to recovery health as possible. Also to document the unmet mental health needs so that we can give the legislature the data and push for more mental health care and support. Again, that's where the data is gonna be important, so it's not anecdotal. We can come to them and say, this is how many people we've been in contact with on the street. They cannot get mental health care, and they're still out there, and this is what's happening with them.
Because
Because
you don't mind me saying, sometimes it's the bucket of money that it's coming from. So if the veteran, instead of the city taking all their money, the veterans will take care of you.
They
Yeah.
will.
You're over 65, you
There's
fall in
certain
another
rules you have
category.
to follow.
Right, but if you don't ask the
Yeah.
question to get the data,
Exactly.
how can you assign this person to anything?
Right, oh, I got them homes, I did so much for the veterans when I worked at the hospital.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
So how we achieve that, we want to collaborate with the faith-based community and other resources to map out the help that is available. Faith-based and street initiatives, know what services, help support is available, connect people with those services and follow-up support. If people need mental health care, know where to find it and document when it's not available. Provide data to the state and county so they can advocate for the treatment centers. And then I think that falls into the nonprofits. Who are they? There are so many around the city that aren't even connected, and when I try to reach out to them, some of them won't even work together. So, but knowing who they are, what they do, is important. What do they offer? Some have different specialties, some are for women, some are for men. What is their current availability and capacity? You said you thought it was 3 weeks, you immediately said, no, it isn't, so those things are really important. For-profit organizations can be very useful in filling in the gaps in services and in supporting other organizations. It doesn't have to be a nonprofit to be able to do really good work. Who are they, what do they offer, what is their availability? And utilize 211. I was shocked to find out Londonderry Police dropped somebody here because they didn't know what 211 is. It's something that's been heavily advertised from the state, and anybody can call there to find out where there's a bed, where there's services available. Calling 211 can identify emergency treatment availability, beds, and rehab. So we've got a couple of people at the down the end here. If you guys want to introduce yourselves, so we've got Kaylin and then the Sober Homes. Kaylin and the Sober Homes.
My name's Jonathan. I own some sober, some recovery houses around the city. Do you want me to? What would you like me? Because I do have some things to say, I guess. But I don't.
Well, we were talking, and you can give your background, your story, what you guys do, and also we were talking about the mental health.
Specifically with mental health, Greater Manchester Mental Health is currently scheduling appointments out to like October, which I don't know why any facility would actually make an appointment for someone in crisis in October. It's senseless. There is no mental health services for the Medicare and Medicaid population, particularly, and also that goes whether in crisis or not. If you are in crisis, you will go to the emergency room for 2 to 3 hours. They will discharge you unless you have a very specific plan about how you're gonna hurt someone or hurt someone else.
Wow.
I just worked with a gentleman for 90 days, and I screamed and advocated he was in the drug court system, he was in systems that should have been able to provide resources to him. There was nothing, and he didn't make it, and he had an appointment at Greater
You said he
Manchester.
didn't make it?
No, he relapsed because the safest bet for him.
I was like, oh.
No, and why did he drink? He drank because the safest bet for him was to drink and go back to a substance abuse treatment center, so he could be somewhere safe.
Wow.
That was his best bet.
Okay, so we need more mental health around here. Can the money go to something like that?
Yeah, well, that's
Open
what.
up new centers.
That's why the county piece is important, and Tony Pappas is gonna be in touch with me after this. She wants to know how the meeting went. That's why it's important. She wanted to send the information that they had, how much money that they had given to the city, but the county can also set up their own facilities. They take care of the nursing homes, so.
What about bodies to staff though? What are the chances there's
That's
enough
ultimately
staff
the
out
problem. It's not even a Medicare, Medicaid, or commercial insurance thing. Even if you have wonderful, great commercial insurance, it's still hard to find a psychiatric provider in this state. The state's licensing board is the most archaic system you could ever imagine.
Yep.
If we want people to get licensed to be able to provide these services, we have the worst board to do so.
Again, that's why the legislators are really an important part of this, because they can roll those back, and even though legislation is in now, we can get them to try to amend something that has that on there. I think they are doing some licensing stuff
I'm
coming
sure
up
they're
that they
doing
might be able to
One of them
amend
was
it
to
to.
allow out-of-state licenses, which
Yes,
is
to grant,
powerful to say like.
to say that
If you have a license in Arizona, you can use it here.
Yeah.
Here.
They, many states do things like that. New Hampshire does not.
no,
So that needs to be a
Oh,
data
you're
point
doing
in
right.
the
Reciprocity.
HMIS.
I'm supportive.
See how they
Yep,
gather
yep.
information to send to you? If they're asking them things, they get sent to you, but you do it in a database so everybody shares it, everybody knows. That person walks in the door, if you have their name, you might even already know their situation and everything about them.
Yeah.
I know it's hard because of HIPAA and all that, but it, believe me, this system has gone through all that HIPAA stuff.
And also, just to respond to the treatment question, you could get into treatment within the hour right now if you needed it. However, not for the higher intensity types of treatment that are required for alcoholics. Everything's been focused on opioids, right, which was important. Opioids don't require a higher intensity, higher level of care like a tier 2 treatment center. You can go to a more outpatient with housing, type of facility. So if you are on benzodiazepines or you are an alcoholic and you're drinking daily, those beds are harder to come by. That's when we need the Farnhams, but Farnham is very limited. Farnham, New Hampshire Detox up in Bethlehem, there's about 3 facilities that can accept them around the state. There's about 100 beds for an alcoholic. Meanwhile, there's about probably 1,500 to 1,600 beds for the rest of the population.
What about access for minors for mental health? As of a couple years ago, there was almost nothing in the
Yeah,
state,
you know.
and it was being shut down.
Yeah,
Yeah, non-existent.
yeah. That's
That's a
where
big
you end up
problem.
having minors living in the ER because they
Right.
have no place else to put them.
Yep, they did that.
Yeah.
And that's where they did that, yep.
And Keelan, you're on the street. Didn't sound good. You're,
I was gonna say, I don't know if that sounded right.
she does street ministry. So Zeal Church is very, very active in the city. Whenever I say outreach, people are like, did you call Zeal? Did you call Zeal? So, and Caitlin actually wants to take it a step further. But you can tell us about what you've been experiencing. And you're on baby number
4.
God bless
Yeah.
you. Congratulations.
Yeah, we just started, a lot of people just started coming to our community that have either been set free from addiction or are currently trying to get out of addiction. And so we're kind of like, okay, I guess we have a role in this, let's figure out what that is. So we've just had several people who have been set free from addiction, wanting to get into real estate and sober homes, so I guess that's why we're sitting next to each other.
I'm a realtor too.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, so we have just recently taken over a staffing company, so we're looking to, get people into jobs, get them into safe homes and living environments, and just see what we can do to do our part, so.
Awesome. Does anybody else want to touch on this subject at all?
What was that?
Does anybody else want to talk about this subject
So
before we move on?
could you just, what do you do now?
My husband and I are pastors at Zeal Church.
That's what I thought you said, so
Yeah.
if you, just 30 seconds.
Okay.
In a continuing care of Nashville, I'll give you a very short story. I forget the name of it, but it's all the faith-based organizations. There was one guy, pastor, that came in there. He says, give me all the ones that you can't put in a shelter. Give me the child abuser. Give me all these, because we're faith-based and we're going to do it. They're human beings. We're going to give them shelter. He came in a month later and he put his head down on the table and started crying. He says, I can't do it. There's too many. He goes, they're even cheating to get in there because it was a better shelter than the other places. So it's hard to do that sort of thing, because I'm a Christian. I might not be the best one, but I think if people just thought in that way, they could help themselves a lot better. So that's just, I just thought that was that
I think
pastor
that was a
was-
thank you for what you do.
yeah, because that pastor was just overwhelmed.
Well,
And he
maybe we
actually
need,
tried.
I wonder if we need to work with businesses to see if they'd be willing to hire somebody when they comes out, because that's the problem.
They
I
do,
can
and
give you
Governor
something on that.
Sununu has an initiative on that too.
And
Good.
employment's not the problem.
Awesome.
No, there are jobs
I was gonna
everywhere.
say,
No, but they-
I know
the issues
if
that-
nothing else, like, prior to this really being a big problem, you would know this too. For an example, Keith Murphy owns Murphy's Tap Room.
Yeah.
He's probably hired more ex-cons than any other
Yeah.
business in the state of New Hampshire.
Yeah.
He will give anybody a second chance, with some exceptions, because of, he's
History.
got a female staff,
Yeah.
he's not gonna have a sex offender,
Right.
you know, that's fair, but he'll give people, you know, it ain't the most glamorous job, but he's been hiring people for years, and there are so many people looking for help in every retail, every Dunkin' Donuts, everything. Like you,
Employment's
it's not the job. The jobs are there, and I don't think if they're the roadblock. It isn't like it was 10 years ago. If you came out of jail, it's
Yeah.
not like you can't get a job.
And
They're-
the salaries are higher.
right. All
Yeah.
they want to know is, are you coming tomorrow?
Right.
Will you come tomorrow? And then again the day after.
Yeah, so that-
I mean,
that-
and we also need to provide some kind of housing for these people that is cheaper.
And
if
that
they-
is,
if they're
that is our
working.
next item.
I was gonna say.
Sorry, getting
No.
ahead, sorry.
No, I'm glad that we're all in sync. We need transitional support and care for people coming out of rehab, prison, or the hospital. Many end up back on the streets because they have no place to live. The goal is to have a safety net for people who have done rehabilitation, be it from legal trouble, addiction, trauma, or abuse. Invest in people who want a leg up and help support their steps to independence. All of this should be getting people to be independent. How do we do it? We work with city leadership to pull back regulations on unused buildings or businesses that are seeking to repurpose. Repurposing a building is much faster than building one. We need to identify unused properties and or businesses that would like to repurpose their buildings, identify homes for sale that can be used for sober homes, transitional housing, collaborate with business owners and investors who are willing to help people who want to invest or start a program. Work with the Aldermanic Board to relax regulations for a faster turnaround. So again, that goes to,
Here.
yeah.
Well, I know. I looked down there too.
And Caitlin, you've been talking about the church actually expanding into that.
Yeah, we're looking to, I mean, our goal is to buy property and all over the city and just, we have people with the heart, it's just a matter of the finances at this point, but, yeah.
And Jonathan, you guys can probably talk to this much better than I can, but when I served with Tammy in the State House, we were legislators together, and when we were up there and the opioid epidemic was really starting to become evident, we had a doctor come before us, a neurologist, who said, this isn't like any other addiction. When people start doing heroin and fentanyl, it takes opioids in general, it takes 3 years for their brain to reprogram, because your brain can trigger you into thinking you're in pain even when you're not, because it still wants that drug. And that's not like anything else they ever saw, or at least anything else they ever studied. So when people are saying, well, they did their 30 days, they should be on their own, they don't understand what a long road this actually is. And it's not weakness, they're not falling because they're weak, they're falling because this drug is so crazy strong. And so giving them the supports that they need, and Jonathan, you welcomed me into one of your sober homes, and I appreciate that. I got to meet the ladies, we had dinner together, and hearing their stories of how many times they fell, and this actually was the thing that saved them. It got them on the right path. I think there's also a stigmatism around these sober homes that we as a community can fight back against, because, you know, all the sober home people, owners, managers that I have met have been very responsible people to the community, even more so than your average citizen. Are there sometimes trouble homes? There are trouble people in every kind of business that there is. So I know nobody wants to be, sober home people to be more, owners to be more accountable than the ones that are running good homes, because they don't want a bad reputation around them. But having this stigma, we had a meeting with some people that didn't want one in their neighborhood, and I was talking to them, and the guy was like, well, they're all felons. Yes, because in this country, if you are just caught with drugs, you are a felon, and that makes it harder for you to get a job, and it makes it harder for you to do anything else in life. I have friends who have been sober for years, got their lives together, went back to school, and they still can't get employment because they're still a felon. So that is something that, as our legislature, should be working on the federal level to get that changed.
Yes.
If you've only been caught using or holding, and you're not,
You're not a dealer. You're just
I don't-
having a good idea.
But that makes it harder for everybody else. That makes it harder for these people to get on a clean path, and it shouldn't be an unforgivable path. They're but for the grace of God go I. I'm sure you guys have talked to people that, I've talked to young people who got injured in sports, great, A students, top of their class, total athlete, got hurt, needed surgery, got put on opioids. Their life was never the same. They found themselves on the streets trying to find drugs for their addiction because the doctors didn't treat the addiction, they just cut them off. So there's all kinds of reasons that people are out there, but it's a long long-term care solution. You're not going into rehab for 2 weeks and your life is great. But not to mention that when you go into rehab for 30, 60 days, you're not working, so how do you come out and get, what's a rent right now?
A lot.
$1,200 for a one-bedroom?
Oh.
No,
Yeah.
1,600 probably.
16 for a one-bedroom?
Yeah.
So you're talking about $3,200 to
Yeah.
get into an apartment? $3,200.
I did wanna-
Taxes went up so
I-
much.
yes.
Yeah, this year.
I did seek a couple things. I have different reasons for wanting to address this problem. Most of them come down to the cost it has on the rest of the community, both financially and just the quality of life. I did see something yesterday or this morning that I thought was interesting. The planning board in Manchester is proposing a change to an ordinance relative to ADUs, which are accessory dwelling units. Currently, an accessory dwelling unit must be attached, which, like in a granny apartment, attached to your, where you have a common door to the unit and whatnot. And they are gonna make a proposal to the alderman that the alderman will have to vote on, to allow separate ADUs on property, so basically tiny homes or.
But this is single-family
Oh,
plots.
On single-family
Yeah.
homes, so like, for instance, I live in a single-family home, if I wanted to set up a tiny home in my backyard and meet all the other zoning or all the other requirements, that I could do so, where currently we can't. One of the most frustrating thing I hear all the time is people saying, what good does it do to build the nicer apartments on Elm Street? What good does that do? Well, the good it does is it floods the market with units. If there's 100 more apartments available, that pushes down the rents because there's more chance of a vacancy, so landlords are gonna be more reasonable about what they accept for rent. And it's like a trickle up thing. If you live in a third floor of a, multifamily over on Heavey Street, you might move to a condo in the Mill Yard, and the people in the Mill Yard might move to the more expensive condo down the street, and then it frees up more units at the lower income level. So it doesn't help us to be anti-nice places, because as a community, don't we all want to live places that have nice places? I don't think anybody wants to only live where there's only low-income housing.
No, and I think that the tiny homes alleviate some of the pressure on our elderly housing, that we have so limited housing for
Yeah.
our elderly.
And there was a bill
And that would
also.
free up other
I
apartments.
think there's a bill up at the State House which, to say that municipalities, instead of saying you can only have one ADU, you could have two, which is you have to think outside the box, so that's fine. What I don't like about the bill is that they said the municipality could require that the property owner make that second one workforce housing, and
That, it won't
that's,
pass with that language.
no,
I
it
don't
won't,
think.
because
But it
you
might
can't
pass
tell
as
a
a form.
property
Yeah.
owner, you must only charge this much money.
Yeah. So,
Anyways, I just wanted,
so that transitional housing is imperative for people that are really trying to do the right things and get their lives back
housing,
together.
not just shelters.
Yeah,
Right,
real
no, not
housing.
shelters. Shelters are a part of
Shelters
the
don't-
problem
yeah.
in the city, because every
Should
time,
be a processing center,
Right.
not just a
Like a 2-day
a
fix,
place where
not a.
people
Like the new one that they
camp out
have.
and stay there. It should be a processing center.
their
Maybe
web,
it's a 90-day window to get your life together. We'll support you, but you have to do this, I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, it's all right.
But some of the terms, if you went to any of these continuing care meetings, and the word from HUD is no wrong door. In other words, all the agencies should be on the same page, and they'll say housing first. Yeah,
Yeah, Ken, I wanna throw a word out there.
Yeah, sure, sure.
Enabling is the word.
Right.
Because if you're not doing that, you're just enabling behavior.
Yes.
Yep,
It's-
right.
It's
That's
a
right.
term people sometimes throw around that says, when helping hurts.
Yep.
And it's
Right.
often just related to enabling.
It-
When you help someone and you're only enabling that behavior, free tents, free
That's what I
housing.
feel about
Free everything.
Panhandling.
I'm sorry, but I think
That's not
majority of-
helping them.
Making
Yeah.
the homeless behavior, or the vagrant behavior, the drug use, whatever it is, making that more affordable as a lifestyle.
Really, it's
And
tough.
and people by nature want, they want to help people, right? So like
Yes.
tonight, I thought,
It feels terrible
maybe,
to say the opposite.
with the weather, maybe I'll ask people to bring extra blankets or jackets, and then I thought, that will
Enabling
actually
them.
cause
Right.
people to die, because instead of going to the shelter, they're gonna be
Right.
out there with an extra
Entirely.
coat, right? So when you have an instinct to try to help, but you have to think your way through it and think of the long term, like what is my act today going to result in long term for this person? And I think we have a lot of knee-jerk reactions in the city, and if you follow Facebook, there's different pages you can go on, and as soon as we said we're opening the shelter, there was all y'all come to Manchester, because there's more beds, there's 3 hot meals a day, and then we get more people that come in here and that we can't
Well, there's
serve.
Part of that enabling is it creates perverse incentives where you have the one that you're just talking about with the vagrants that wanna come here or something like that because of the incentives here, but then you also have, like, if there's housing and there's money for housing, then you're gonna have people that have perverse incentives. They don't actually wanna help any of the vagrants or any of the homeless people. They just want the money, the grants, like you were saying earlier. Oh, FIT takes up all the grant money. It's like, well, that just, it's clear that there's a perverse incentive within the charities. A lot of these charities, you look into them, and they're not that private, or they're very much publicly funded, because they get grants from the government. So they're quasi-government institutions.
And there's no incentive to actually solve the problem,
There you
because
go.
then the money.
Even
They're
use
not
the
the people on the
system.
ground that care. They're people that want to write grants and get grants. And there's all these perverse incentives to create things that don't actually help, because it's kind of like treating cancer versus curing cancer. Like there's money to be made by not curing the disease.
And that happens on the
That's
city
so
level
true.
too,
I'm glad you
because
said that, because I
the-
have a hard time saying that.
the
but
city,
it's true.
and I wish John DePietro was here, because he's read this book and he's very good on this subject, but there's an incentive to keep the city in a bad way, because more federal funds come in. If we solve this problem, we get less federal funding.
It's called growth.
And people, so people complain about the landlords and the price of the rents, like, it's not the greedy landlords, it's the greedy city, because
Yep.
they keep raising the property taxes so they can feed into these other things. But we'll get into the politics of it later.
There's also professional grant writers that work for
Yeah.
FIT and Harbor Home, so they grab up all of them, or essentially all of them, because they just know how to write the grants.
Does FIT have to provide like public outcome measures? Is there, cause quickly, when they were vacating the encampment, I went down there 3 times, trying to, see if anybody was interested in going to treatment, and, I was able to successfully get one person out of there, one day, and,
One person at a
he had been
time.
at FIT for about 3 days. His case management appointment wasn't, not that week, not the following week, not until the week after. So he was gonna be there for approximately 15, 20 days before even getting a case management assessment.
Jonathan, that's a good
He
idea, I'm
wasn't
gonna look into
make
that.
it there. So if they're getting and, you know, if they're getting all this money, and we are depending on FIT quite a bit, is that public? Do they submit
Where's-
reports? I mean, I
right.
know lots of nonprofits that have to submit reports, here's what we're doing, here's where we're succeeding, here's where we're
Yeah,
failing.
I don't know what the criteria is, but you're right, there should be some
Well, and
performance evaluation, right?
Someone has to police the right.
no, but we're talking earlier about how the homeless don't trust a lot of the help, and that's fair. But I think also the community doesn't necessarily trust any of the process, because I
Right.
keep saying that, I'm like, where's all this money going? A perfect example, we've opened the shelter starting tonight. It will be open through the end of April. That's 12 weeks at times, 7 days. It comes out, they had in the newspaper that they were budgeting $90,000 for food. So I'm like, well, what does that come out to? So you do the math, and it's $1,000 a day for 40 people. That's $25 a person every single day, which is not what any
They're ordering fine
working person spends on food every day. No couple spends $350 a week on groceries.
And the rent is a half.
And that's
$1,000,000.
just one aspect, so it's hard to feel that there's confidence in what's happening when the numbers don't always add up, or the numbers are just non-existent. You
But
don't
also-
know.
Well, I have a question. If they're drug addicts, that means they have to leave to go out and use their drugs and then go back? They
That's
should
why
not-
they're
Well,
routine when they go in.
yeah,
They
Yeah,
should not
they're
allow them to
taking
leave.
more
You come in, you
before.
Well,
stay
you
in.
can't, there's
Yeah,
no,
I've been
that,
through
there's
it. I
constitutional
already
rights, you
can't
can't
work
force
Yeah.
them.
What about
So they're gonna do drugs then on Beach Street?
Of course they're.
Yeah. Well,
What
they
about
do in, New
incentivizing
Horizons.
people
I know. I
to
just talked to someone who works
become
there.
helpers?
They
All
try to
this
keep it up, but
funding,
they
someone
can't.
like me, I wanna help, I don't have a license to
Right,
help.
right.
How about incentivizing people that wanna help to be helpers,
Yep.
who can then help the people who need help?
Yeah, and I think, Kaylin,
Well, how long
welcome
does
volunteers,
Medicaid
you
give
teach them how to do outreach and stuff, so,
Yeah.
so
Help
that's
30
an
days?
avenue there, so we can work with the churches who do the outreach to train us how to do it and get out there safely, cause there's a safety component to
Absolutely.
going out there
Yeah.
too.
There's a lot of individual agencies.
So what does
that are
Medicaid offer? 30 days of help?
No idea.
I mean, when I first started in this, I had to fight with Medicaid to get them covered for 30 days. It was
That's a
outreach
legislative.
only,
Jonathan?
outreach
You can
only.
get covered,
I fought for it
Medicaid
and
within
finally
the
got it.
hour, and your benefits will be on, and you can use them. And then, 6 months later, you have to resubmit for recertification based on your income. But there's so many different agencies, and none of them work together. And that's the main,
That's what I'm saying.
that's just the biggest problem.
If they work with that HMIS system, if not that, then what system then? A system.
Back to what I was
For
saying.
whatever reason, the fire department is the first responder for our homeless
Yeah.
problem.
Right.
They should be fighting the fires.
I-
They're always
I
on
know. I get
the,
it.
front page, the poor firemen, like.
They were
go fight
cleaning
fires.
the Cashin Center, they were
I
the ones
present
cleaning the
idea
Cashin
that-
Center.
That possibly that they don't work together because it's not about helping anyone, it's about money. It's about them getting money, it's about them and their high salaries, it's not about helping people. If they wanted to help people, they would be working together. Since they're not,
Somebody has
that's
to help
strong
bring us
evidence that it's not about.
Yep.
I think somebody has to help bring us together. I don't agree with that statement. I think most of these agencies do wanna help.
They're
For whatever
frustrated.
reason, we don't have the leader, which should be the city, right?
There, that's a
To
point.
bring-
Somebody's gotta lead, you're right.
I mean, I think it's a problem that we have in the city, that's why we're all sitting here, and, I think that,
What
we hired like a homelessness, initiative person, right? I don't know why all these agencies aren't together.
And that's,
And-
Jonathan, we've
and
talked about it
co-
before,
Can't you
that's
get a
exactly what I've been saying
meeting
for
with all of
years.
them?
I can tell you that I started the Ward 9 meeting based on a problem in our neighborhood and tried to work with Shauna, tried to come up with ideas to try to help people that were on the streets, to bring them in, tried to help with getting contractors together to help with any properties the city owns.
This is my ward, so it's part of those conversations, and it was very frustrating.
And found that perhaps there's just two contracting big companies that are having in, and anybody else that wants to help and make things better is kind of locked out. And ran into that, I was saying, okay, how about giving some responsibility to people, like you were saying, that if they're getting services, okay, can you do this now? Oh, no, we can't ask anybody to do anything. The problem with that, though, is besides enabling, is you're not giving them the tools to start feel better about themselves and get better.
Yes.
And we have to find a way to just get rid of that concept and try to get this done. Just pull up our boots and get the work done.
We had a guy
Forget
that
the
had
bullshit.
heavy equipment, cause we live near where the trails are, where that poor gentleman was murdered not too long ago.
I do too.
And it's been a problem area for a long time with, and it is again because people are moving back over there. We call it the Cracker Barrel encampments, and people are like, there's a Cracker Barrel in Manchester? We're like, no, that's where the billboard is. Cracker Barrel billboard. They live underneath there. And we've had an ongoing issue where people actually dug holes and were living underground and put like a tarp over it. But the trash and the stuff that was
Disgusting.
The biohazard.
Oh, it was awful, and we had neighborhood cleanups all the time. It eventually got to the point where we couldn't handle it, and at one of these board meetings, there was a guy who's like, I've got heavy equipment, we could do it, and the city told us we couldn't touch it, they wouldn't let us do it. And it cost that gentleman that owns that little piece of land like $30,000 to clean it up, because the city let it go to a point where it cost that much money. We were constantly calling and saying, we need help over here, you know? So we've got one more item, I don't wanna keep us too long. The financial, fiscal responsibility, okay, I think we've got two more. Fiscal responsibility, so we've talked about it a little bit, but what people don't talk about a lot is it's not just about finding housing or your apartment. The financial stressors increase violence, domestic violence, addiction, mental illness, and homelessness. Being financially strained can trigger mental illness. We hear about it all the time, where kids are abused and wives are abused in homes because husbands do. Because when financial strains heighten, the whole family unit is strained. So we need to get citizens, and this is where we can really reach out to friends and neighbors. Get citizens and the board to understand that the board can create affordable housing immediately. The significant increase in property taxes over the last few years has created a situation that is pricing people out of their homes and apartments. The city leadership blames greedy landlords when it's really the greedy government that has created it. So how do we do it? We testify before the Board of Aldermen about the budget and get them to understand that raising property taxes has a direct negative impact on our most vulnerable. We create a group of real estate owners, managers who can testify about the, well, on the wrong page, about the increased property taxes and how it's impacting them and their tenants. Teach citizens how to testify on their own behalf and tell stories to the board. There are a lot of folks that are afraid to go before the board. They're afraid to speak up, and we can help train them. Some of us that have
Some of us
who have done it. You were great at it. You too, Richard. You did a great job last time.
Yep.
Well, thank you.
We can deliver one clear message, and that's the thing. It needs to be one clear message that we're saying, like, when you raise taxes, it hurts your community in this way. People are hurting, and it increases all the things that we're trying to fight against right now that put people on the streets. And we need to elect fiscal conservatives. Like I said, we have nonpartisan elections. The most important thing that we need to be doing right now is talking about fiscal conservatism, because every time, the amount that they have increased the taxes over the last few years is damaging our community. And even though Tammy was one of the people that put in the tax cap, but because of inflation, that tax cap isn't gonna protect anybody this year. It's gonna be another 3.5%. So in the last 2 years, we're looking at almost 8% increase in property taxes. As a property owners, you've got property owners in here. We know that doesn't just get consumed by the property owner. They still have expenses that are increasing, like heat and electricity and the sewer bills, and the price to maintain a property right now is through the roof because construction materials are so high. So what's going to happen if we keep having an increase in property taxes is we're gonna have slums. We're going to have slumlords because they have no money to put back into their properties. And people
That's
buy
already
properties
happening.
to run a business. It's not a charity. They do it to make a profit. So if we don't stress the fiscal conservatism that we need to have at this board, we're going to see this as a cycle that continues. And the kids that are in the homes that have to worry about meals and a roof over their head and domestic violence, it's going to be a generational cycle. And people, it's not, when you're fiscal conservative, it's not that you don't want to help people. I'll help people all day long, give them a leg up. But when you're raising money on the taxes and the property values, the rents on the most vulnerable, you're hurting the entire city because you're increasing the problems that we're seeing right now. And so we can, Tammy and I, some other people here, if you know people that are willing to speak, they just don't know how to really craft their 3 minutes, we're willing to help them. If you hear someone that's saying that they have a problem, say, hey, why don't you come to the meeting next week and connect them to us, and we will help them, because I think we need a stronger voice at these meetings. It can't just be 2 people coming forward because the board feels like they can do anything they want. It's not impacting people. So we really need to reach out to people that will be able to come forward. And last, it's the state and county elected officials need to be brought into the fold so they can understand what we're facing and how they can help. Part of this is the fault of the city leadership, but there are 4 critical issues. Tens of millions of dollars have been given back to Manchester to resolve the homeless crisis, addiction, and mental health support. It was not used in a way that was responsible to the taxpayers or responsive to the city. And Governor Sununu, I will post these if you guys are on Facebook. I will post all the links to the information from Governor Sununu, a screenshot of the money from the county, and this agenda so that you can share it with people and you can see it. But we've had ample money coming here to resolve this issue. It just hasn't been spent well or wisely. Funding. Manchester needs to advocate for resources outside of the city to help people. Manchester cannot carry the burden for the state and beyond. You saw that there was a letter that went out from all the mayors, and in that letter it said that Manchester needed another shelter. So of course all the other mayors signed on to it because Manchester has the shelter, right? So we need to reach out to our legislators and tell them that we can't carry the burden and that these other towns and cities need to do the same. And it doesn't have to be a big town to do it. You can have a little town. A lot of these little towns are struggling right now in the real estate market. They've got empty homes, and having the county come in and utilize those properties for shelters and services is really important, but it can't all be here. The failure of the bail reform law of 2018 has resulted in violent offenders being re-released into our city. The homeless camps give them a place to hide. It's a recipe for disaster and has resulted in innocent lives lost. We have Manchester State reps who voted. We have Manchester State reps that voted against changing this law. So I went to the State House and I spoke on behalf of this last year. It was after the woman was raped for 2 hours in the cemetery, and it was by someone who had been re-released on PR bail. When I was there, we had a couple of state reps from Manchester. One, Amanda Bolden, got up and walked out. She didn't even want to hear the testimony. So we need to hold our legislators accountable. I understand there are legislators in like other towns that don't understand how it's impacting Manchester, and we need to be a voice for our city and let them know. Again, that's testifying at hearings and going before the board, or sending an email or making a phone call, because sometimes they just don't understand how it's impacting us or what the bill reform means.
But, so on that though, the bail reform's a tricky one, because the alternative is paupers prisons, which is not a good viable alternative either. So
Right,
what's,
but
what's the solution?
So you shouldn't be held simply because you're poor, right? I think we all agree on that. But if you've been arrested for a violent offense and you're put on a PR bail and you're rearrested again for a violent offense, I think it's fair to say that you're a danger to society or yourself.
So a repeat offender.
Absolutely.
That
Yeah,
should
that's
be, that should
what
be
it
the
is.
easiest thing to pass,
Just a
because,
repeat offender.
It's called
Right.
consequence.
right, because I'm
Yeah.
with you, I don't wanna see somebody sitting in jail simply because that poor 18-year-old kid that was in Valley Street Jail for something like 6 months a few years back, because his family literally couldn't afford the bail.
No.
And he
Yeah.
was found innocent, and he can't get that 6 months of his life
Nope,
back,
that's
No.
the thing, yeah.
you know,
And there is a bill right now, Senator Senator Abbas, Senator Carson, are co-sponsors of that. I believe there's a couple other people in there, but it says exactly
That
that.
they might have
Repeat
actually
offenders
voted on
for
it
violent
this
crime.
week. Yeah.
Violent crime, sexual assault, and
Yeah.
the only thing that wasn't violent was stalking.
Because the problem is because it's confusing, because there's lots of pages of bills and lots of pages of legislation. Currently, the problem is everybody goes to a bail commissioner. That's the way the bail reform was. Take it away from, people don't have to go in front of a judge, they go in front of the bail commissioner. But then the bail commissioners are told that they have to release them on personal recognizance if they don't have the money. And the bail commissioners aren't even getting paid because there's no money, the person doesn't have any money to pay the $40 to the bail commissioner. And then they reoffend, and then they still don't pay the bail, and the bail commissioner still doesn't get paid, now they're owed $80 by this person. And part of the problem is that not all crime arrests should go before a bail commissioner. If you're charged with murder, you don't go before a bail commissioner. You know, there's a lot of crimes that, it's unfortunate because some people, if you're arrested on a Friday night on a holiday weekend for aggravated assault, you might have to wait until Tuesday morning to be in front of a judge. And that's unfortunate. But it's probably not any more unfortunate than the fact that we have somebody murdered on the trails by somebody who was released again.
Who
But
else
it's not 6
remembers
months.
the former chief of police posting over and over again every day, this person rearrested today,
Yep.
we arrested him earlier, but I have no choice,
have-
I have to let him out. It's crazy.
Somebody thought what was a good intended bill, I think, with the bail reform, to do away with forcing poor people to stay in jail, opened up the floodgates, and now we have to just kind of put back common sense.
Yeah.
um,
Yeah,
some
we can't have
common
people
sense.
die. We can't have 75-year-old Army veterans walking in our trails and being savagely murdered. I
Right.
mean, he wasn't just stabbed, he was savagely murdered. And so that's when that
scares me.
that flipped things for me, because I have been someone who's been, you know, waving my arm saying, you know, things are out
But
of
you're
control
hysterical,
here.
so
I'm
it's okay.
hysterical.
Yeah.
And just trails aren't safe, and in the ward pages, I'd be like, don't bring your dog down there. You don't know what he's sniffing. Don't let your kids go down there. Now, my kids are teenagers, and I would give them mace to go down, which I found out after is illegal, which I'm getting that law changed.
Oh,
I'm getting that changed.
I
You have to be
pepper spray,
18
but I
for
won't
pepper
go.
spray.
Oh.
I'm like, no.
What?
Yeah, we're changing
you
it to
can't
children.
defend yourself
We're changing
then.
it. Right, but I don't care if it was illegal.
Unalienable
I'll
rights.
take the misdemeanor on protection.
Yeah, no,
But I
seriously.
was worried because they would ride their bikes, and I was more worried about someone coming out and sort of harassing them or them being scared. I wasn't, and I worried about women being down there. I wasn't really worried about my teenage boys being harmed, right? Like in that way. And when that man was murdered. My son and his friend had been down the trails 24 hours before, riding their bikes down to Five Below to get candy. And the thought that that guy could have been down there and just didn't choose them
Yeah, indiscriminate murder.
changed everything for me. Like, I'm on a war path to change this city. Like, this is, no child is dying on my watch. Like, that's how I feel. And it was way too close. So it can't happen again. We can't have innocent people being murdered because we have mentally ill people who keep getting released from prison. And that's another thing. There should be an evaluation if they're arrested repeatedly to say, hey, maybe this person needs help.
Maybe there's a problem.
Maybe we can't just release them. They need mental health care.
But now you're running into, because places like the trails you're supposed to use for walking are unsafe. Me personally, I walk my dogs on busy streets.
Yeah.
Right.
Because even carrying pepper spray and a whistle, I'm not going down those trails.
No.
So now I'm gonna get hit by a car possibly because of it.
And why shouldn't you be able to
Why
walk
shouldn't
the
you?
trails?
Yeah, you pay for those trails. You should be able to use them. And the thing is, that trail also goes down to the ball fields, little league, soccer. It's where the kids used to go to access those things. So, I'll stop now because I'll get really upset. So we need to get our elected officials to understand what it means for us here. We have to teach our citizens how to get in touch with them and how to testify. And we can document incidents of repeat offenders in our city. That should be easy enough to bring up so that when we testify, we have actual documentation of what's happening. Circulate the legislative list of Manchester representatives and senators. Follow my Facebook page, please, and I will put the stuff there. You don't have to reshare it from me, but you can take the links and the images and screenshot them yourself and share it on your own. Help people craft letters, the importance of revising this law and how it's impacting them. Hold a legislative boot camp, helping people understand how hearings work and how they can testify, because it can be intimidating and there is a process when you go up. You have to sign in, you get a pink card, and we've been through it. We can train people how to go up there and testify and advocate on behalf of our citizens.
And to be honest, as a legislator, you want to hear from more people.
Yeah.
You don't just want to hear from the department head and this one person and a lobbyist. You want to hear, when you're trying to decide how this impacts people, if it doesn't impact you directly, you're like, how do I know how this impacts
Right.
people? You know, and if people don't take it,
God
it's
bless
not
you.
it's not that intimidating, but it's uncomfortable for somebody who's never been there. I would love to take people up to the stage.
And on big bills, we can go up and have lunch in them.
That's
So
right.
speaking of bills, while we were discussing, I went on Gen Coke Mobile and I looked up the alcohol and other drug use professionals bill. It changes the licensing setup a bit. It's not super revolutionary, but it's SB 44, and it's in committee, but it's already had a committee hearing, so I don't know if it's going to get referred to another committee or not.
It's a Senate.
Unless
It's a Senate bill.
yeah, so if it doesn't have a fiscal note, it won't go to another committee, it'll go to the Senate, and if they vote it up, then it'll go to the House.
Yeah.
So what would I look for?
On the bottom, it would say fiscal, it would say SB 44 FF.
FN, I think I saw that somewhere. But what would that mean if it had a?
It means
Fiscal
that
note.
it goes through the House, it goes to the Senate and it gets passed, and it goes to fiscal.
say it when
we
no
voted
more
on again.
committees.
It goes to, might go through judiciary or wherever,
Yeah.
and then once they make a vote on it, the Senate says yes, and then if the Senate approves it, they say, okay, now it goes to finance on the Senate side.
On the stand.
To
And
look
then
at
it
the
goes
money.
to the House.
Yeah, I think I saw
Yeah.
an FN tagged on it somewhere, so it's
We will
still in
open
Senate.
it.
Yeah, there it is, FN, 44
Yeah.
FN.
Field trip.
No, a cheat sheet,
As if
you know,
it
like
is.
this, when
Oh.
it's this,
We
and
should
then
have a
it
field
goes
trip.
It
this,
That would be
is.
fun.
this.
So that's it. I just want to touch base. Nora, you haven't said anything, so I wanted to see if there was anything you need. Nora is one of the people that invests in the city. She is a business owner, downtown businesses. It's a company that her dad started, and it's her legacy. And she's trying really hard to protect it. So we want to work to make sure that our downtown. I would love to see an active downtown again, where people are safe and want to be down there. I'd love to see an active waterfront too. I think this area is so underutilized.
Yes.
But
There's
the other
no
night,
area in the city safe right now.
my husband and my son went to the Shaskeen, because we're Irish, so.
It's gonna happen.
So my 16-year-old's hanging out with Shaskeen now. Because I did a TV show downtown, and I was walking from them. It was like a block, right? So I'm walking to them, and I'm someone that's very aware of my surroundings. I've got pepper spray. I'm like, I'm good. But because of the snowbanks, there's There's now a group of men that live down there on the sidewalk. There's a man sleeping underneath an umbrella because their tents have been taken. So this is where they're living now downtown, right? And they blocked the sidewalk, and because of the snow embankment, I couldn't go around them because it was a snow embankment, the cars, and then I'm in the street. So I called my husband and he said, "What are you doing?" I said, "I need you to just walk out the door and stand there because I have to walk through these men." And I don't care if they were homeless. Any group of men, no woman is going to feel comfortable walking through it, nor should they put themselves in that situation. So as he's walking out, of course, wrong thing to say because he's like, where are they, right? Right into protective mode. And I'm like, as I start walking, they looked at each other, and one gentleman actually said, "Step aside so she can get through." So they weren't intimidating me. I was just feeling intimidated. And I walked through and they were fine. But who wants to walk through that? And if I had kids with me or little kids with me, like, you don't want to walk your kids through there. Or if you're an elderly woman, like, you're not going down there. And so I want to have a thriving downtown where we've got shops and businesses and the Christmas stroll like they have in Nashua, and really have a city that we can enjoy, have trails where our kids can feel safe and go down there. I mean, I don't make it sound like Mayberry, but that's why I chose the city. That's what it was when I moved here. And I know you want the same for your downtown businesses.
Yeah, so I own North End Properties. My father bought all the properties at auction in '91 when there was a depression in the
When
city.
there was nobody buying anything.
Yeah, so when the banks were closing and
Yeah.
shutting down, he bought all the properties, got out of the corporate engineer world. And so we own 10 properties. He has been diagnosed with Alzheimer's, but thank God I took over and worked with him for many years before that. So now I've been here I grew up in Bedford, which I don't like to tell people, but I'm so proud to have gone to West High School, probably the best experience of my life. I loved it there. And so I've been around for 15 years and I've seen a lot. But now I have pressure to, protect my father's legacy. And I have pressure because I have a 7-year-old and a 10-year-old, and I want my legacy to live on. So unfortunately, I have been at ground zero for several homelessness encampments. I own the Thirsty Moose building. And
Look
so,
at us.
yeah, so we have 20 luxury apartments above. I rented out my basement, which I think is exciting, to the Granite State Escape. And Thirsty Moose is a very successful and professional business. I love working with them. And then my office is on the second floor. So I'm a very family-owned landlady, and I know all my tenants by name, and we have 10 buildings, and I care about them, and we're just not corporate, very family-owned. So when there was an encampment on state property of the court on Merrimack Street, that very much affected me. There were also 20 people on the Merrimack Street sidewalk next to Veterans Park once an ordinance went through that they kicked
months
people
back.
out of the court. That really affected me, and recently I was at ground zero of Tent City because I was the abutter. I own a parking lot next to Brutus Auto, so that's where all my luxury tenants park. So
So then they had to walk past all of that to get to there.
absolutely, all of that, yeah.
I'm sure you heard no complaints.
Exactly. So I tend to be a sponge. I always meet with the police department to learn. I come here to learn. I meet with people on both sides of politics. I don't care who you are, I'm ready to learn. And so I try not to accuse, I try not to blame, I try to come up with solutions, think outside the box because I'm a landlord, I don't have a boss. I can be edgy and I can apply pressure where sometimes City Hall can't. And sometimes where I work with some amazing, people, they often have boards they have to represent, or they have bosses they have to represent. So I do say what needs to be said when I need to say it, but I keep it classy. But I and a lot of business owners led the fight with Tent City, and it was very hard for me because it's like trying to find the balance of protecting your property and your tenants and your employees, but also protecting human life. It was devastating. It was lack of sleep. It was like, Nori, maybe you should give them apartments, but then what if they forgot to turn off the stove because of some mental issues? So that's like one pet peeve I have is when people are like, housing. Like there is this category of homelessness that can't handle an apartment, that are putting my entire building and my tenants at risk because they won't remember to turn off the stove. So there is that category that is not ready for housing, so they need support. And I think the Zeal Church has done amazing marketing, because all I hear about is the Zeal Church. And so thank you for all that you do. I am close with Rick Blaze. He absolutely adores you all. So I think, outreach is necessary, but because of everything I've experienced as a landlord, I tried to raise money to create homelessness pods, which in Burlington, Vermont, they have them, and many other states across the country. And they've been successful because security comes first, when the idea of homelessness pods. So people are feeling like the way of the shelter is the old way, because people don't feel safe in the shelter. And so when you don't have safety, you have nothing. So I am a grandchild of the Holocaust, and I've watched my father, a child of the Holocaust, live in a life that is, obsessed with security, probably overboard obsessed with security, and it haunts him, and it haunted him his whole life. And so the minute I found out that the pods were not just a place for people to be, but they were a place that provided security first, which allowed these people to get actual sleep. Mm-hmm. So to me, security is 1, sleep is 2, and then come up with a plan to save their own lives with the daily help. I felt like, wow, this pod program is not just little houses. This actually sounds amazing. And it was 20 pods. They only do 20 pods in certain locations, because if you do more pods, it becomes a gang mentality. It becomes too much. So I started raising funds from other landlords to build these pods. I mean, I don't know where they're gonna go. They take a lot of work and time. They need someone dedicated to put it into them. But I proved from one email to the landlords that I was able to sell meaning like construct 10 pods at $4,000 a pod. So I raised $40,000 with one simple email, and I didn't even work for it. It was one simple email. So whether the pods work out or not, because of logistics, because of location, I am here to say that when you think of a landlord, you think of like an old curmudgeon, grump, and I think that I have networked very hard and met a lot of landlords because I care about this city. And the landlords I am meeting do feel like they need to help. They don't feel like City Hall can handle it on their own, and they feel like if there's something else we can do, they don't want to lead none of them want to lead. I mean, it's hard to gather landlords, I have to say. But the minute I can get, kind of like a politician, the minute I can get you one-on-one,
Don't look
you'll
at me,
fall.
I'm a public servant.
The minute I can get them one-on-one and say, like, I am you, you are me, but we need to come together and make change together, then I can grab them. Then they fall in love.
And based off of that idea, like pods maybe would be great for people who don't feel like coming in, but what about, like, say, give an example, an old building that's a church or a school or whatever, and having like little one-room apartments, like almost like an expanded shelter.
What is interesting is I find bizarre. So Manchester does not allow boarding houses. By ordinance.
They have boarding houses.
They are all grandfathered. I know because I live next door to one. They are perfectly fine neighbors. I'd rather live next to that boarding house than probably a 3-family non-owner occupied apartment building, because it's clean, it's well kept. Yeah, there might be some, interesting things there, but whatever. But it's like, how did we wonder when people say, how are people supposed to get ahead? What did people do? We used to allow things. I mean, you used to be able to rent a room in a house.
Yeah.
To get have someplace to live.
And all
Now-
the old movies, you see all
You
these
know, I
young
mean,
women
and
that live
that would-
together in boarding houses,
Right, so, you know, the city, I do blame the city for a lot. I blame the government for a lot because the government gets in the way of people achieving goals. I'm like one of these geeks that looks things up. I was gonna go to the aldermanic meeting, I think it was the one that maybe you were speaking at, and I think I was sick, I don't know. Interesting thing. So the definition of emergency, because that's all we hear about, is how this is an emergency situation. Definition of emergency is a serious, unexpected, and often dangerous situation requiring immediate action. I take such offense to hearing about this being an emergency situation when you're talking about the tents on the federal lawn. That was before COVID.
is that 2 years ago?
Before COVID.
Yeah.
That this is not an emergency. The fact that they're opening the shelter on January or February 2nd in the middle of winter
A day
means
before it's gonna be
nobody
10 below.
thought about winter. We pay people to be the homeless coordinator, and you didn't think about winter before winter. This is
Well, no action took place until the
Until
pressure
everybody-
was-
but
until the
that's-
pressure was applied.
that's what's
and,
right.
and that's like the biggest thing that I'm like mind blown about is like it took me to gather why hasn't any other business owner ever gone
Right.
to those meetings?
Well, I was curious about your pods idea because I've watched this unfold in other cities where they're deemed illegal and like it happened
Oh,
in
because
LA.
of zoning? Is that what you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, in LA, they literally just carted them all off and took them to the dump and said, you can't do this. A guy built
Yeah.
a bunch of pods and
But
they were
I
in
think
front
if
of
the
him, and they carted
city
them off the
did
dump
it-
and said, you're not allowed to do this.
Right.
There's
Like,
a lot
what's
of-
the solution there when the city comes
Right.
down and says, oh, we care more about the law than solutions, you know?
Nori,
The-
I
the
think that
answer
you-
Right,
for
and so
that
that's the thing,
was-
like, I guess I'm the fundraiser, right, with the pods idea, and I've done a lot of research about the emotional side of it,
Yeah, it's
and
not
what it can
pods,
do
it's
for
tiny.
homeless people to actually reach recovery, and I have chills.
It's-
Share that.
But I am not,
Send it to me.
yeah, I'm not
Yeah,
the
you just-
implementer, you need the city to
I
implement
think the
it.
city would have
The
to.
reason-
It's
the
like they'll
reason
only
I can
allow you
tell
to-
you,
they-
'cause
they
I
get the
raised this
money
a
to
year
do it.
ago.
Cause it's all about
Right.
the money. They want the money to funnel through them, they wanna take their cut. But otherwise, if it was about solutions, they would just allow zoning for you to do that.
Yeah.
They would say, of course you could do this,
A
because it
year
solves the
ago,
problem.
Yeah.
We
And
had
I-
our first meeting and we were told, you can't force people, they're probably not gonna come in.
There's a
well,
lot of that.
Then
They-
it's
they
gonna
don't- they
bring
won't
more
do it.
people from other cities when they hear about it in other states.
have to say,
And then
in
you're gonna
my-
have to keep
yeah.
it clean, and then you're gonna have to have security. So frickin' do it.
So I was
So
gonna
wait,
say,
in the article that got released, Union Leader without my permission, it was so preliminary for me to see if I could even fundraise.
Right.
That I didn't want that going to the Union Leader, but it went and I had to get ahead of it, so there it was. But I did list that I would like an application process for the pods to figure out if these people actually don't want to be forced into a
Right.
pod, right? Not
Right.
forced, but they want to go back home to their
Right.
families.
Right.
Right.
And is there family in Florida? Because
Right.
if there is, then I'd like to allocate funds
to get them back
for
home.
yeah, of course they have to say I want to go back to my family. I'm not going to force, but I got a lot of criticism on that. I also got a lot of criticism on the landlord side saying, Nori, we see your idea. It's not your, not my idea. Pat Long's idea. We see Pat Long's idea. We appreciate you're trying to raise money, but your application process will never go through. The city will never allow it. So therefore, we're not donating to you. So I'm like, fine, I'll go hit up other people, other land. There's a million landlords in this city,
So there's,
But,
I think
but there's problems on both sides.
But I mean,
I think it's Steve Harvey said, don't tell people your dreams unless you want them destroyed, right?
Yeah.
So
Right.
you've got a group of people here that are doing the work.
Yeah.
They're already doing the work. We don't need permission.
I was gonna say,
Right.
don't tell the city your dreams unless you want them to destroy.
So-
just do it.
But I think that you should talk to the folks on the end of the table here, because I think there might be a better use for that. And I'll say when it comes to the pods, and you and I have talked about it, my problem with the city and the way they've handled things in the past is egos and everyone wants
Yeah.
their pat on the back and their trophy. And that's what happened with safe stations, right?
Yeah.
Instead of keeping it to help the people on our streets when it was effective, because in the beginning it was effective. It was all
Look at
y'all,
us.
all y'all, look what we're doing. Come here, go to DC, get your trophy. Then they started marketing for people to come here, and we could not give them the services. So anything like that would have to be on a very small scale, and any conversation around it would have to say
Very
how
small.
limited
Yeah.
it
Well,
is,
so-
and you have to already be living here to
Well,
be
and
able
here's
to,
the thing,
to get.
if the city
get
did
into
work
that.
with me on this program, and they nix the application process, I can't go ahead fundraise money from landlords who I preach the application
Right.
process to.
Well, and I
so
think-
this could fall apart, you know,
I don't-
but at least I'm trying to take
Yeah.
But there
I
might
don't
be a
know.
different route that's not pods.
Right, it could
And
be
that's
not
why,
pod-
like, these
right,
guys
and
will
that's the
figure
thing,
that
it might
out, so
not
you
be
should talk to
pods,
them.
it might be
I don't
something
know
else.
if it was you that was saying, somebody said it, that, you know, a lot of these we need to empower these individuals to have value in themselves so that they can move forward. So you're talking about, you know, let's say there's some place and there were 10 pods. With an application process and with requirements, because it's not just a free place to stay.
Right.
It is to get you from point A to point B so you can get to point C. You say, in order to do it, this is the area, it has to be kept clean.
Yeah.
If you don't keep it clean, you're not gonna be able to continue to stay. You're gonna, in order to do this, you're gonna have to do X, Y, you know, maybe you have to volunteer at 1269 Cafe and serve lunch once a
Or
week.
God forbid, you actually have to pay $2 a night. You
right,
know, like
something.
something, because there's a psychological effect to that. It's not just a kid.
It's
who's
called
out.
pride.
It's
Right,
I'm
I'm taking,
It's getting a psychological effect of people being
I'm
like,
not
I already-
against,
you know.
I think the problem is where would they ever go? And I keep seeing things in the Union Leader now, people writing in and they keep talking about the top of the parking garage. And I'm like, you know, that's not a terrible idea. It's unused space.
In the wind it might be.
Well,
Then did you have?
I have a
Side
quick
view.
question though. I really don't know how government works, so this is why I'm asking.
It
I went
doesn't.
to a recent,
Let's go with it, Dustin.
I
wish
went
I were
to
you.
a recent zoning
But I'm
board
learning
meeting.
too. I mean, I'm a
went-
landlord, yeah.
I went to a recent zoning board meeting for something else, and it was where that new apartment building was going, after they were denied, they were approved. Your pod idea, who is in charge of approving or denying that? Is it
Well,
the
it's
zoning
actually-
board? Who is it?
It's actually implementing. We're not even
Yeah.
like at.
So who do you go to though? The zoning board? Because they seem to realize that there's a huge problem here and we're
I
behind.
think that
It would be
Alderman.
Yeah, no, it's really the alderman. It's
It
the
would have to
alderman.
be the alderman probably.
Which
Okay.
I have,
And then
which
what?
I have a meeting
And then what?
scheduled
The
with,
zoning
with
board?
several aldermen that are amazing people, and like it just, I feel like it's
Still
gonna
need
take a
plans.
year or two, and I'm like, you know,
Well-
when somebody's at ground zero, I will
Right.
work on that. I really will, but I also need short-term solutions because I want to protect human life, but I want to protect my tenants. If I have a young woman come to me with their parents and say, I'm moving to Manchester, New Hampshire, can you help my daughter? And I am,
And you're like, ooh.
yeah, and I am like, they ask me about the neighborhood, they ask me about, like, they're putting their daughter into my building. I have an obligation to this family to protect this girl.
Right.
And I won't let anybody get in between that. Like,
And-
this is my legacy, this is my tenants, these are my employees, my left and right hips. Like, I need to stand up for what I believe in, and I can't, like, the crime, what they have to walk through to get to my parking lot,
Yeah.
like, I'm becoming to have zero tolerance.
So when you say this could take a year, that's why we can have the alderman reduce the regulations on existing homes, properties right now, and that is the fastest way to do it. We've got businesses, they're no longer using their businesses for offices because of COVID. They found it was more cost effective for their folks to work from home. And Ben Gamache actually did a good job taking one of his buildings and turning it from a
Yeah.
business office into apartments, right? That could be done. Ben Gamache is in a position where he owns other properties and he has the money to not get around the regulations, but to go through the regulations, right? He has the money for the process. But other people that don't own multiple buildings don't have that
Yeah, like
same,
mom and pop land.
right?
Like
Yeah.
the faith-based organization, right?
Right.
Sitting
Right.
next to us, so I was gonna, you two should talk after, I mean, there's a solution. She wants to manage, housing, faith-based organization, you're a landlord, that raised a bunch of money,
Yeah.
Here's a
That's what I was
solution
saying, you
right
guys
here.
need to talk.
Yeah, I was seconding that.
And
what you
then
said.
let us keep beating up the alderman,
So, yeah.
and make sure that we can pound home the message
could
that we
manage
need
a
regulations
large
to cut back.
house that has, 4 to 8 bedrooms that could house 8 to 16 people with money paid for by a there's so many ways, but
And
the
they're getting
city has to
services
allow
though,
it.
so they're going
Yeah.
to be, they're moving toward
And
independence.
I have to think about the risk of like
Yeah.
the mental health.
Right.
And yeah,
Yeah.
it's as scary as a landlord.
Well, look at the fire recently.
Yeah, that's the whole thing.
There was somebody broke into a house and they built a fire on the
In the house,
floor
yeah.
of the vacant house.
All right, we've got down the end, I wanna wrap up.
Real quick, Andy, well, personal long-term recovery, sober houses in the city as well, work a lot on the front lines with Jonathan, people in homeless and active addiction, early recovery. The one thing that I'm hearing that everyone's saying that comes together is that there's like a lot of disconnect, right? That there's no communication between organizations that serve people that are homeless or in recovery. And personally, that's the biggest problem, because the problem isn't that there isn't employment, it's that there's no employees. The problem isn't that there isn't housing, it's that there's no suitable tenants, right? Like, the people that are homeless, we can put them in a house, we can give them a job, we can give them new clothes and a brand new car, but guess what? They're gonna be homeless again in 60 days. It's because they don't have an effective design for living. I was homeless, a faith-based community helped me get back on my feet. I was able to do so and help others in serving, but through a community, right? Like, the opposite of addiction is connection. We have
Absolutely.
a community. However, when we invite a homeless person to get back on their feet, we say, here's the services for a new design for living, and those services are not even a community, and they're completely disconnected, and there's no organization, and no one talks, and no one shares. They're like, obviously this doesn't work, you guys are preaching a solution that you don't even use, right?
Yeah.
So if there's any way in the state to get these organizations, profit and nonprofit, whatever it is, together in an effective manner through a data system, through communication, through someone governing them, saying, hey, if we're gonna give you millions of dollars, you need to actually produce results that are measurable, right? And we need to be able to see them and how they connect with other organizations, because if they don't, we're gonna allocate those monies somewhere else. At the end, like, my father-in-law owns the Beacon building across the street from you.
Oh, Brian?
Yeah, Brian's my
Oh
father.
my God, he's like my big brother.
I love Brian.
Love him.
And I'm a landlord, and I'm a person in
Oh, wow.
long-term recovery, and I got sober, and I lived under a tractor trailer for the first 3 months that I was clean up in Berlin, New Hampshire, where there was absolutely no resources, right? And I got sober and tried to bring resources to that city for the longest time until I came down here, because I realized I could actually make a difference where I couldn't up there. So I've lived through all of it, and the one thing that I'm hearing in this room that Manchester doesn't have, and I've seen it from experience, is there's no connection, right?
Yep.
We open a sober house. Sober houses are statistically proven to be the best long-term care for a person in recovery, because you can give them the job, but they're gonna lose it because they don't have a design for living. You can give them an apartment, but they're gonna get stressed out about funds, they're gonna end up getting drunk again, they're gonna get addicted, they're gonna trash the place, they're gonna leave. It's the day-to-day communal living, it's the ability to turn to other people that have been through the same thing and learn how to get through it without going back to old behaviors. And we can't even open a house without getting shut down by the city every other day, because there's no communication. And I understand there's places it should happen and it shouldn't. There's operators that shouldn't be operating, and there's ones that should, but there's no connection. It's completely separate. So when we look at someone that's homeless and we're like, hey, we can give you services, and they come in for those services, and they're not even connected, and there's no communication, and they're like, you need to make this phone call and get on this list for 60 days. And they're like, screw this, right? Like,
I'll just go back and live in my tent.
Get messed up. That's my best option right now. Homeless people don't have an effective design for living, but they do have a design for living. And it's much easier to obtain for them than it is our current design for living. We need to make it more accessible and more easy. We need to communicate for that to be effective, or else it's a waste of time.
I forget, what's the meaning of insanity again?
Yeah. So I think what
Do
you're
the same thing
saying,
over and over again.
I agree with, and we've talked about it before, like, we have so much going on, but we're not coming together, because that tells us what's working, what isn't working, where their gaps are. Like, I've been pounding that drum for 4 years, and it's really important. I think at this juncture, it might be worth our time to call Governor Sununu into the conversation and say, listen, you wanna solve this as much as we do, and but you can get these people in the room. And egos aside and profits aside, you can get them in the room, right? And start having the conversation so that we can work together. And I think it's really important, like the people that showed up today, I think it's really important that the representation that we have for this city, because I think we covered everything from citizens to legislators to homeowners to former people that were formerly homeless, to people that struggled with addiction, faith-based groups. I mean, I think we've covered everyone that needs to be at this table, and we just need to grow this group so that we can get to the work. And I just want to, before we close up here, the plan itself that I presented, it sounds like we are all on the same page on this. So is it a good way to go forward?
Yep.
Anything you don't like, anything you want to add?
Roller skating upstairs.
You want to go roller skating upstairs?
Is it really? Was that a
No,
joke?
it just sounds
Oh,
kind of movies on the
I was
hero.
like, is there really
Some jet going over.
But my contact information is on here too, so you can get in touch with us on the last page. Most of you, I think, already know how to get in touch with me.
I might.
And when the camera's off, I'll give you my phone number again because I'm not well liked by everybody in the city. But we can stay in touch. Is there anything anyone wants to say before we wrap up?
I just wanna jump off what he said, that that's primarily who is a part of our community, is people that have come out of the addiction space that are devoting their lives to saying, like, looking people in the eyes and saying, like, you can do this, you can get free.
That's
And,
huge.
if you need help, we're here to help you. And, so, yeah, I'm just excited about any opportunity that
Because
we have
that gives
to-
them hope, right? Because
Yeah.
when you're stuck in addiction, the biggest thing you have is hopelessness.
Yeah,
So when you see people that have actually accomplished it and they're living healthy, productive
Exactly.
lives, you think maybe I can actually get.
Well, you're treating a gunshot wound with a Band-Aid,
Yeah.
right? Like, 99% of the people are homeless or addicts, and if they're not, they don't stay homeless for very long because there's nothing keeping them there, right? We're treating the idea that they're homeless as the problem is getting them nowhere, because it's not the issue, it's that they're in addiction, and that their addiction has brought them to homelessness, right? So if you give an apartment and a job and do nothing for their addiction, they're just gonna end up homeless again.
Related to that, it's like the idea that, like some people have said that rents or taxes or people being driven out of housing because of the cost of housing going up is the cause of homelessness, and it's not, like that's maybe part of it, but it's not.
It's it for him.
What's that?
It's it for him.
Well,
It's
you said
like-
he had a
But
conclusion.
temporarily, right?
But it happens.
So
It
people
does
that-
happen, it's just
people
not
that
the
lose their homes
predominant
because of that, they're like,
amount.
they go live in their car, or they go find a friend to live with, like they lose their homes, but they have other resources. It's, I think, people that have destroyed those other resources, burnt those bridges, that end up homeless.
That's a minority in the homeless community, is someone that's there as not a result of some sort of addiction.
Right, exactly. Right.
But the financial strain can trigger back
Right.
to
Correct.
addiction.
Yes,
Yes,
oh, sure.
yeah.
Feedback
And the
loops
mental
stuff.
health.
Yeah, I agree with that, yeah.
Jonathan, did you have something?
Yeah, I just wanted, my last, just, the conversation around, I've had to unfollow so many, threads on social media and stuff, because the conversation just bothers me and disappoints me so much in the city. To some extent, we are the largest city in the state. We are a leader in all these things, education and healthcare and all these things. We have the most here. So we want to be a leader in all these areas. We have to be a leader in social services. People are still gonna come here. They're gonna come here because if I was homeless, I would come here too. This is where the most people are. This is where the most it's supposed to be where the most services are. But like we've all been talking about, we don't have combined efforts, coordinated efforts.
No.
So it's like the isolationist attitude that's been part of the conversation is very unhelpful.
Yep, I agree.
And I just, and so I just wanted to say that's what
Yeah.
bothers me most is the isolationist attitude. Let's be a leader.
Because it's impacting everybody, everybody on every level, and we need to come together, and we need to, like I said, push the egos aside and whatever else, because people are literally dying on our streets every single day. Our trails aren't safe for our kids, and I'd like to think we're leading in education, but unfortunately, we're really failing there too. But I
mean,
think
like the higher education.
I-
I'm saying
yeah,
it's
yeah,
really
yes.
like
but I think a
the
lot
higher-
of it goes to the
Nah.
generational problems that we have in the city currently. So I just want to thank you all again so much for coming out. I think it was a great meeting. I hope you guys feel like it was a good use of your time. We've got sign-up sheets so that you can tell me where you want to work at things, where you'd like to volunteer and help us out, what your expertise is. And I will put this up on Facebook for anybody else that wants to join the conversation, and hopefully we can meet again maybe in a few weeks. If it's okay with you guys.
Thank
All
you
right,
for
thank you.
organizing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kyle.
I have the list. I
Thank
didn't
you.
put my